Hello, friends. This is Cara-Renee with B.Reborn Art and Healing. Welcome to episode 8 of Water Media Wednesday. These are some of the supplies that I'll be using. I'll be using that beautiful floral spray. I am flipping through my journal that I've created so far, but I'm actually using a piece of Arches cold press watercolor in 140 pound. And then those are the watercolors I'll be using. I will be embossing the image with black ink and then using clear embossing powder. So just getting my floral in place on my Tim Holtz stamp platform. And because it is a clear stamp, I did have to flip the lid. It's built to be able to use with both rubber stamps and clear stamps. So it does take me a couple of stampings to get this impression dark enough. It is watercolor paper, and Arches is fairly thick. So, which not a big deal in the stamp platform, because as long as you don't move the paper, you can continue to stamp as many times as you need to. So now I'm going to go ahead and emboss that. And again, I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's really juicy and really great, creates a great impression. And then I'll be using clear embossing powder. I find that it's easier to use the colored ink that you want and use clear embossing powder. I feel like you get a better texture. Not texture, a better impression. And here I'm just heat setting that. It's just beautiful. You can't really tell too much in the photos that it's embossed, but in person, you can definitely tell. So I'll be starting with my leaves. And just as a precursor to this process, I'm not sure why I chose that quinacridone gold because it ended up being kind of problematic. It was a little bit too dark, and then the olive green that I had in this palette, it seemed a little bit muddy to me, but it's okay. I'm just creating in my journal, practicing my watercolor, so I wasn't too concerned about it. There's a time to play, and your art journal is a great place to do that without any fear of judgment, either from yourself or anyone else. So it's a great place to experiment with what you like and kind of find your style and your rhythm. So it's all good. So I will be speeding ahead here in a moment, or rather cutting out part of this painting of the leaves, because as you can tell, there are quite a bit of leaves in this image. All of the supplies will be listed on my blog for episode 8 of Water Media Wednesday. And so you'll know where I got this stamp, as well as some of the other supplies that I'm using. The watercolor paints I'm using are kind of a mishmash of different artist grade watercolors, some of my favorite colors. So I won't be necessarily linking that because it's a palette that I put together myself. And so here I'm coming in with that olive green, and I just really was not happy with the depth of color. The quinacridone gold was really orangish, and I love the color and I use it quite often, but in this case, I felt like it was a little bit too much, but you'll see me kind of working through that process. And in the end, it's beautiful. It's just that the leaves turned out much darker than I would have wanted, and with a little less variation. So here I'm going to go ahead and paint in that bud at the top. I'm going to wet the petals with just clear water, and I'm going to drop some of that paint in. And that is the quinacridone magenta, really, really vibrant. And when it dried up, when I looked at it the next day, it was super, super vibrant, not muted down at all. It's just gorgeous color. I would highly recommend that you get the supplies, the best supplies that you can buy for your budget, because I have found that especially the watercolor paper that you use has a lot to do with how successful you are at watercoloring, and it's a lot less frustrating. But I know that there's great artists out there that can watercolor paint on any surface. But again, I sprung for the arches early on in my watercolor journey. And so it is my favorite paper, and it just responds well. When you hit that, you drop paint into water on the surface, it just spreads everywhere. It's magical. I never get tired of watching that movement of the paint and the water. It's really fun. So there I just finishing up the leaves a little bit there. And then I'm going to start on my flowers. And there I was just bringing in a little bit of a wash of a brighter sap green from that palette. I was hoping that it would help to lighten that up. It really didn't, but again, in the end, it was just fine. And I decided I was going to do this middle flower yellow. Yellow can be a really challenging color to watercolor paint in, but because I'm just doing an art journal page, I wasn't too concerned about any kind of realism or even a drastic contrast in color or depth. So I was able to create some depth using the yellow, and this is the cadmium yellow medium watercolor. And then I do paint the middle of all of the flowers with that quinacridone gold. And the reason for that is because in order to create a sense of unity in your painting, you want to not bring a lot of different colors in, and use the colors that you've already started using. And so since I used that quinacridone gold in the leaves, I felt like I needed to actually use that again in the flowers. And so there I wet the inside edge of that petal, and then I dropped in some of that quinacridone magenta. And it's just gorgeous. And then I can blend it out a little bit with my brush. This paint also responded really well to being lifted. So there were some petals that were fairly small that got really dark when I did this process. And so I was able to just take my brush and lift out some of that color to reveal some of the lighter highlights. And there I'm just finishing up that flower. The process for every petal is really the same. You're just basically dropping in the color in the base of the flower or anywhere where a petal is overlapping another petal. And there's a close-up of that. Super fun stamp. I like it because it's bigger, and I feel like I can really get some good watercolor practice in by using it. And again, I'll make sure that I list that in the description on my blog as far as the supplies that I've used, and it's particularly that stamp. It's gorgeous. And now I'm just going to go ahead and do the same with this other flower. And there, I'm finishing it up again. I cut out a lot of this because it's really repetitive. And I would just encourage you, if you have watercolor supplies, to go ahead and get them out and just play. And just watch the magic of the pigment and the water. It's just, I fell in love with it the very first time I tried it, which was about 4 years ago. And so it's just it's a very calming, relaxing process. I do want to say, though, that this is the third project that I tried to do for Water Media Wednesday, episode 8. I had 2 beautiful projects before, but at the very end, in both cases, I put my wrist in something. So I had black archival ink on the side of my hand, and I was doing some finishing touches on the project, touched my hand on the paper and ruined it entirely. And on the other one, same thing happened. I dried some color, and because I was using a different medium than I normally would, it bled out, and it bled way outside of the image, and it just was not recoverable because it was a really staining color. But I just kept trying because I'm like, I'm going to do this. And so here I'm just coming in after that flower is dry and just doing a really light cadmium yellow wash, which is basically a watered down version of the pigment, just to kind of give a little bit of color to all the spaces. And then I do come in with a little bit thicker paint in the cad yellow medium, and just put a little bit of darker yellow on those turned up petals there. I chose a very simple sentiment for this piece, and it says, "Do whatever it takes to let your spirit soar." During these difficult times, I just really wanted something simplistic with a very simple message to my viewers as well as to myself, just to kind of let go of everything that burdens us down and weighs us down and causes us to worry in these times in our world. It's just really, it's intense. And I'm a believer. My faith is very important to me. And so I try really hard to not worry. And so anything that I can create that reminds me of that calm place and that peaceful place is a good thing. So what I'm doing here is I actually cleaned off that stamp really, really well. And I'm going to use it as a mask on top of my project so I can do some splattering all around the floral spray there because I didn't necessarily want those splatters on the flowers. So I'm using the cadmium yellow deep, the sap green, and the quinacridone magenta, and I'll be just splattering those over the page. And I hope that you liked this video. And if you have not already liked and subscribed to my channel, I would sure love it if you did. I love sharing art with you, and I know it's fun to watch. This is how I learned, was watching YouTube videos. So hope you have a great day. Take good care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.